This is a brief tutorial on how to format quotations in MLA format in an analytical essay using prose sources. Just a quick note, there are a lot of different nuances to quoting sources in an essay, and this only goes over the most frequent examples, but I think it can be helpful, especially for students learning to write a literary analysis. So we're starting today, we're just going to pretend that we have our thesis, The Pressure of World War II Transforms Jean, Finney, Lepper, and Brinker in a Separate Piece, and that's the thesis we're trying to support in our body paragraphs with our evidence. So let's start with our first example of a quotation that we might find in an analytical essay, and that's a quotation that is fewer than 4 lines in the body of an essay. Now, in the text, this quotation, which here is just right here, okay, this sentence, it is general narration. It does not have any quotation marks around it. No one is speaking. It's just the narrator talking to the audience. So we've learned that when introducing a quotation, we need a quotation introduction that gives a little bit of background about what's happening in the quotation. That's right here. Then we will have a colon to indicate that the next piece is a piece of evidence from the text. And then we'll put quotation marks here to indicate that it is a quote. We'll close the quotation when the quotation is over. And then we have our parenthetical documentation, which is the last name of the author and the page number from which the quotation comes from in parentheses. Notice there is no comma after the last name of the author, and then the period comes after the parentheses. Okay, it's part of the sentence. And then the inference for that quotation comes immediately after. Notice how all of this happens in the same paragraph. There's no indentation, there's no different lines, everything is in the same paragraph when you have a short quotation like this. Let's move on to the next example, which is a longer quotation in the body of the essay. So again, just like we would with a short quotation, we start with a quotation introduction that tells the reader what the context of the quotation was. Unlike a short quotation, however, we have a quotation that is going to be 4 complete lines or more if we block it. That's what we need to do with a long quotation. So I'm going to take the beginning of this quotation, I'm going to put it on an extra line, then I'm going to indent twice, and then I will indent all the other lines 2 times so that it looks like a block. All of the lines have the same left margin. Okay, this is separated from the rest of the paragraph. Because it's blocked, I don't need to include quotation marks at the beginning or at the end of the quotation because it's obvious that this is quoted from a text. Unlike the first example as well, the period comes before the parenthetical citation here because I know that this is a citation. So the period comes here instead of here, but we still have the citation here. Also, unlike the first example, when you block a quotation, after the quotation, you go back to the left margin, and this is where you start your inference. Okay, you don't tab after that, you go back to the left margin, you start the inference with the remainder of the paragraph. Okay, the other 2 frequent examples that we often see in an analytical essay are quotations that include dialogue or they include quotation marks in the original text. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how to deal with that in an analytical essay. So here's our first example. Again, we have a quotation introduction that gives me a little bit of background, and then this is what the text looks like in the actual book that I'm using. There are quotation marks because someone is speaking. Now, to show that not only is someone speaking in the text, but I am also quoting this from the text, I need to include an additional single quotation mark. All right, and then I will go back, and then the outside quotation marks indicate that I am quoting this from the text. The inside single quotation mark indicates that somebody in the text is speaking, and then I will do it the same at the end. I will have a single quotation mark to close the dialogue from the text, and I will have double quotation marks to show that my evidence has concluded, that I'm done quoting this passage. And then, like the earliest passage, I have my parenthetical documentation, the page number, the period comes after the parentheses, and then I will begin the inference just in the same paragraph. There's no different lines for a short quotation like this, even if there are quotation marks in the original passage. And then the long quotation is a little bit different. Okay, we're also going to block this because it will be longer than 4 lines when we block it. There are quotation marks in the original text, which is why they're here. Here's my quotation introduction. I'm going to put this on a new line, indent twice like I would for a block quotation, and everything is going to be blocked. Unlike the earlier quotation up here, the earlier block quotation where there are no quotation marks at the beginning or at the end, this one does have quotation marks to show that somebody is speaking this in the text. There are only 2 quotation marks, okay, to show that someone is speaking in the text, because I know that since this is blocked that I am quoting this from the text. Okay, then you end the quotation, you have the citation, and then the inference, like before, returns to the left margin, and this is where you would begin typing. Okay, I think those are the 4 most basic quotations that you'll need to use in an analytical essay. There are other sources that you might use, such as poetry, that might be a little bit different. I suggest talking to your teacher or looking up how MLA formats these different examples, but this should be a nice tutorial to help you for an analytical essay.